So Rupert, you've kept yourself busy this Emmy season. Let's talk a little bit about your work on The Alienist to start off. Uh, what were some of your initial ideas for the music for this limited series?
Well, I wanted to get down into the streets, really, the sort of sounds of the streets of New York at that time. So I did a little bit of reading up, a bit of research, and found that the cultural diversity at that time. There were a lot of Italians, Jewish communities, Eastern Europeans, all sorts. So I kind of wanted to have a little bit of that sort of the folk element of those countries, and then there is a bit of a love story going through, and there's a very complicated hero, Chrysler. So I wrote a theme for him, and he gets more and more complicated as you go through the series. So it's something that I could develop on. Those were the first ideas, but really it was to do with the sounds and sort of smells of New York at that time were really interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of an interesting point you bring up, because I mean you do have a melting pot of immigrants, from all over the world that are in New York at this time, and a bunch of different cultures. So how do you capture all of those things without making it sound like a mashup, or just kind of discordant sounds? How do you blend those together?
Well, there's some common denominators as far as instruments go with all those countries. So I use sort of early guitars and whatnot, and percussion. And actually, I didn't mention the Irish. The Irish were a big part, obviously, of New York at that time, and they're a big part of the story. They sort of run the police, and there's a lot of corruption. So I found that there were instruments like accordions and broken pianos. Of course, they come from Czechoslovakia as well as they do from Ireland. So there was some joining points I could dive for in colours. But yeah, actually, the Irish really were the biggest. The biggest culture that I sort of really hit on in this show. So I was using fiddles and dulcimers and all sorts.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the love story. Talk a bit about that and how you captured that musically.
Well, I say the love story. There are a couple of love stories that go on, and actually they're fairly unrequited. And if people haven't watched it yet, I'm not going to can't go into it in too many details, but it's something that builds over the 10. It is 10, isn't it? No, over the 10. And it's something you wonder about, and you're not really sure which of the characters. I mean, Dakota Fanning is the central figure of this love story I'm talking about, but you're not really sure who it is that she loves or who loves her, and you get there towards the end. So it was subtle little stepping stones and a bit of rope that I tried to give throughout the whole series, which pays off in the last couple of eps.
Mm-hmm. There's also a lot of really grim subject matter in this show. I mean, for people who haven't seen it, it's about tracking a child murderer. So how do you capture that kind of grim, ominous feeling that this story has?
Well, personally, I did it by I went out and I play string instruments. I play lots of different string instruments sort of badly, but enough to get what I want out of them. But I didn't own a double bass before this, but that's the first thing I did when I read the script, was I went out and bought a double bass, and just had it in the studio sitting there with a couple of mics on it the whole time. And before I got going, after I'd read the scripts and before I got going with anything to picture, I did a lot of jamming with the double bass, and just try to experiment with sound, and I came up with a sound that was sort of guttural and something that represented the killer. We see a lot of the killer. Well, we don't see anything of the killer. I mean, we see a lot of POV, point of view of the killer, through the series, and so I just wanted you to sort of feel, before we saw him, there was just a bit of a guttural, emotional feel that then grew into to what you saw he was looking at. So yeah, I made a lot of nasty noises, and got in a room with a friend of mine who's worked with me on loads of things that I've done, called Tony Clark, and he plays very guitars in peculiar ways with lots of pedals. So we sort of combined his guitar, my double bass, and had some fun and made some nasty noises.
And that's how you're able to also create suspense in a lot of these scenes. How do you do that?
Well, with lots of solo instruments, I did when I recorded I had strings, but I did most of it myself, and I didn't record it in a. Normally, you have a mic sort of 8 feet away or 6 feet away. I normally have one, 5 or 6 feet away, and then one a ways away. And this time, I kept the outrigger, the one that was a long way away, but I put the close mic really, really close to the strings. I mean, just really here. And I didn't do it with a group of strings. I just did it with myself playing, maybe 2 at a time. And a combination of me being not a great player and also playing everything very slowly and very, very close to the mic it unnerves you slightly. You're not sure. I mean, from my point of view, it sounded like, is he gonna make that next note? And that actually it has an unnerving quality to it, and which helps with tension.
You've done a lot of television in addition to all of your movie work. I mean, you worked on Veep for a long time, The Crown. How does the daily grind of pushing out 10 episodes of The Alienist compare to working on a feature film?
That's a good question. I mean, the films that I'm working on currently, I mean, in the last 2 or 3 years, are movies that I would I'm on for quite a long time. So they are a long stretch project because they're long films. They change a lot, especially these superhero films. And so in that way, they're long. Because my answer was going to be, with television, it goes on for such a long time, and then suddenly your deadlines are very short and sharp. Okay, you've got 2 weeks. Can you get an episode in, and then that one is only in a week, and then that one is 3 weeks, and then we have 3 that are just a week back to back, and there's a lot of there's a machine that has to work. With films, I find that I can be afforded more time to develop ideas. I could spend a month or 2 writing the main theme, and on telly is just not that time. But funnily enough, on Alienist, I did start. I forget the timings, but I read the script in, say, June. I got some early cut in July, and I didn't really start writing until September. So I had a lot of time to have some fun. So in that way, it was similar to the way I work on a movie. But normally it's just bang, 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 bang. The deadlines are very, very short and sharp.
Well, does it get easier? I mean, when you're doing, multiple seasons of Veep or multiple seasons of The Crown, after you've kind of established like a baseline for the kinds of themes that you're working in, does it get easier season by season, or do you still fret about how you're going to come up with the right music for a specific moment?
You do still fret, and you also fret about keeping it fresh, because the directors are doing that all the time as well, trying to find a new way of telling the story, or as the characters grow, in the Crown's case, they grow with age and with responsibility and drama and love and hate and all the rest of it. But yeah, I mean, you have themes that develop and that you can call on if they were useful and good themes, and that happened on The Crown in the second season. But there was a lot of fresh material had to be written in the second season. There's no resting on your laurels, especially with Peter Morgan, the creator. He's very much wanting to make new ground all the time, and how can we see this from a different angle? So yeah, no, there was no sort of, we'll just use the music from from Ep 2 in the first season and stick it. It's not that. It's all got to be fresh. But I mean, reoccurring themes are terribly important in TV and in movies, and we had, by the end of the second season, we've got quite a few. I mean, the second season, Philip became he didn't have a theme in the first season, but he became a very important character in the second. So that was the first thing we did, was write the theme for him.
We'll talk a bit about that. I mean, what was Philip's theme? How did you come up with that?
I came up with that with Lorne actually. Together we did it. Well, he's a complicated character, Philip, out there on his own with a very difficult job to do, and I came up with it, I guess, or Lorne and I came up with it, really after many hours of discussion with Peter Morgan about how he saw Philip, and how his interactions with the Crown, and how he affected and helped and hurt Elizabeth. Yeah, so I mean, quite interesting writing a theme together. Lorne and I've done that a bit over the years, and I haven't done it with lots of people. And Lorne and Hans are kind of two of the people I've done it most with, and they're really easy to work with because there's no, they're not English. Oh, well, Lorne is Scottish, and Hans is German. They're not sort of retarded emotionally like like most English, like most of us. So they don't hold back, and they and that's really good fun to write with them because they just they don't hold back.
In both cases, with The Crown and The Alienist, and a lot of things that you've done, Wonder Woman, for instance, you've got to put the audience into a period, and into a very specific setting. You talked about this a bit with The Alienist, with capturing the sounds of the street and all that. With The Crown, also relatively recent history. I mean, there's people who are alive that remember this stuff, like the royal family. What do you do to kind of put the audience into a very specific time and place musically?
Well, score-wise, I didn't really actually, and the second season was for my money, was a more interesting musical moment in time because it was in the 50s. But I didn't really, in fact, we didn't at all try to be in the 50s. There was a fair amount of music that, needle drops, source music used that was supposed to be coming off a record player, or just for a montage that we used. But for the most part, the score is stately, but it's kind of timeless, and it's actually quite modern in many ways. Instrumentation that you wouldn't have used in the 50s. So I didn't deliberately try to. I think it would have been a bit tiring for everybody if we had all been sort of 50s jazz and what have you. I think there was enough coming off with source music. And
well, I guess
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. What did you say?
We would have lost our edge. We with the modern instrumentation, we were able to maintain a bit of an emotional edge, I think. I hope.
Yeah, I guess I was going to say, I guess that's what helps make the show feel as you say, modern as you do. Oftentimes with shows like this, there's this sort of distance between the audience and the film or television show that they're watching. But I guess in this case, it helps really draw you in and make you feel like you're a part of it in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think so. And there's a distancing, and also we've been there, especially with English costume drama. We've been there, and there was a definite effort for this not to be just another costume drama, although the costumes are great, and it's very authentic. The music didn't have to follow that, and I think that was a good call. Wasn't necessarily my idea to go down that path, although I wouldn't have gone down a 40s and 50s path. But it was, Peter was very adamant, this is not what we're doing, and he was right.
Mm-hmm. You received your second Emmy nomination, your second career nomination for The Crown last year. You were previously nominated for Jack and the Beanstalk, The Real Story. What has that recognition meant for you?
It was fabulous. I mean, I really enjoyed getting the nomination last year. And to be honest with you, The Crown was for me was such hard work because it was something I hadn't done before. And so I was so very glad of it. But with Jack and the Beanstalk, it was a long time ago now. I forget what year it was, but I was quite early on in my career, and it meant a lot to me. And that event, I guess we call it. It wasn't a series. I think there was just about 4 hours of film, probably 2 nights of long film. That was meant a lot to me. I was pleased with, it was the first time I'd written something that I felt that I was quite pleased with, which is a rare thing for some of us composers to feel pleased about it. And it was able to flex my muscles, um, a lot on that. And so getting recognized for that was special.
Before we go, you've been working on a lot of big movies lately. Recently, you did Hacksaw Ridge, you had Wonder Woman, and now you're doing Aquaman. Can you give us a preview? Are you working on Aquaman currently? Have you done any scoring for that?
I haven't recorded yet, but I'm currently writing and working with James Wan on the score, and it's the film is so epic. It's going to be something very different, for DC, and just for superhero generally, which is a challenge for me, but it's been a lot of fun and great working with James.
I look forward to hearing it and seeing it as well. Rupert, thank you so much. Pleasure talking with you again.
Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you. Have a good. Thank you.